Hey guys, Adam here, and in this video, what I want to talk about is the ramifications of adding correlation in your lineups. We need to be adding correlation in our lineups, but we need to understand how that changes player exposure. It adjusts it in a really big way, and then we'll actually walk through a use case or an example of late breaking news and show how that changes not just the players that you think are immediately impacted, but how it impacts the players correlated to the players who are impacted. I'll get into that there in a second. So this is Fantasy Cruncher, great tool. Like I said, I've used this for 3 years. In my last video, I mentioned that. Really, really good tool. And in this one, I just popped in 2022 week 1 projections were 8 days out. This is going to be changing. It's going to change over the course of the next 8 days. And I just ran 150 just straight out of the box. I have a few settings, and you'll see like your quarterback exposures here is a lot of Jalen Hurts. You'll see the best wide receiver plays are these guys here. And this kind of makes sense. And I haven't done anything you can tell before I do this. You'll see like I don't have any stacking. I don't have any rules. I've got like 2 Raiders without their quarterback, weird stuff like that. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just add a little bit of correlation. So I want to stack with the quarterback with at least one player of, I'm not even going to include the running back for now. I'm just going to do this of the opposing team. I don't recommend doing this, by the way. I like to have a lot of control of my what players I have in these groups. So I actually go in here and create groups, but just for the sake of this video, I'm going to just do something real simple. I'm going to do a double stack with a bring back. That's what this is. At least 2 wide receivers or tight ends on the same team and 1 from the opposing team. You could have had a running back. However you want to do it, it's fine. So I'm going to run this, and we're going to see the differences in exposures based on these stacking rules. I haven't adjusted any projections. I haven't adjusted anything. I've only added correlation and the stacking correlation, which is highly recommended. And so you'll see this is the first. Remember, this is the first run while the second one's running. I'm almost there. You'll see the best wide receiver plays right now are Juju, Pittman, Devontae, and Jamar, right? And you'll see that their quarterbacks, because in this crunch there was no correlation, their quarterbacks, Mahomes is like 2%. Derek Carr is 11%, so he's a pretty good projection of his own right. Matt Ryan's like one lineup, 0.7%. And Burrow's like 8%. So when we add correlation, I'm going and popping over to this other crunch here. And what you'll see here is the wide receivers who are the best good plays are still probably around the same. It's the top 4, right? In the same percentage. There's a little bit of adjustment. But what you'll see when I flipped over to the quarterback tab is things have changed drastically. Matt Ryan didn't change. Poor guy. But the other 3, these top 3 receivers, there they are. Just from a straight up points per dollar play, blah, blah, blah. These are your best plays. And you'll see just by adding correlation, you have significantly increased your exposure to the quarterbacks. This is entirely based on the fact that these wide receivers are good plays. And since there needs to be correlation with quarterbacks, you've effectively increased the exposure to your quarterbacks, whether intentional or not. That's exactly what's happened. And that's a really important point because like Jalen Hurts maybe isn't the best, was a good play in his own right, but wasn't a good, and isn't as good a play when you try stacking him with 2 of his pass catchers. Let's take an example of like late breaking news. So Keenan, let's say Mike Williams, who is the wide receiver 2 on the Chargers. Let's say he's like out, right? He's out. I'll just lower his projection. We could have set it to 0. Let's set it to 0. So while Mike Williams is out, he's got, stomach bug or something. And so that adjusts projections. And just for the simplicity of this, I'm not going to adjust everyone's projections. But let's say I bumped Keenan Allen to like 21. So I gave him a pretty good boost there, like a 20% boost. He's going to be the man. I could have boosted like Gerald Everett or someone else too. And right now, as it stands, you'll see Justin Herbert's exposure is at 5%. I didn't even adjust Keenan Allen that much, but I'm curious what happens if I adjust his exposure to his projection up 22 because of late breaking news, which this happens. You're having projections updated live based on late breaking news. And you'll see, obviously, Keenan Allen is a smash play with that type of projection with a prediction of 22. And he's getting owned quite a bit or has a lot of exposure in your lineups. and I'm trying to save this till the 150 show. I want to see what Herbert's exposure is. So going back to the other crunch, you'll see Keenan Allen was 20%, Herbert was 5%. And this crunch is almost done. I want to see what Herbert's exposure is with Keenan Allen bump so high. So Keenan Allen's 58%. And look what happened to Herbert. This is with Mike Williams having a projection of 0. His exposure doubled. Meaning when you start building stacks in a fantasy, in Fantasy Crunch or an optimizer, a lot of the quarterback exposure is dependent on how good of plays their wide receivers or pass catchers are, whoever you put in the stack. You would add running backs. It would have been the same point, right? This is like a really big deal that we need to understand because do I really want this much of these quarterbacks? What's interesting though about this, I want to make another point here. This is really big, is you'll see in the other stack or in the other crunch where Keenan Allen wasn't, was 20% owned. You've got 30, 16, and 12% here of these guys. And in the next crunch, you'll see, because Herbert was increased a little bit, these guys kind of went down or stayed the same, but Derek Carr actually went up. Now, the question is, why would Derek Carr go up because Keenan Allen's projection was increased? And the answer is because there's a correlation between Keenan Allen and Derek Carr. In fact, they're playing each other. And in our stacks, remember we said stack quarterback with at least one wide receiver of the opposing team. So Derek Carr is now an even better play because he still has all his pass catchers. We haven't adjusted any projections on them, but we've adjusted Keenan Allen. So now it artificially inflates. I don't know if it's artificial, but it has the repercussion of giving you even more Derek Carr, probably more Derek Carr than you probably want, simply because we've raised Keenan Allen's projections to like 21. This is really, really important that you and I understand this because we can increase projections, whether artificially or just because their projection is increased based on whatever sims or stuff we're running. And it has an impact in how the people around him are correlated. And so I think it's a really important concept to understand and to potentially adjust based on things that happen.